Welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast. I'm Chris Muntz, and you're listening to Episode 4, Part 2 of Seeing the Trees. In Part 1 of the episode, you can bounce back to that opening part of the episode if you have not already listened to hear my kind of full premise for this topic, but I'll give you the short version first. I feel like in group activities, oftentimes we place the group's needs and the group's outcomes as our primary directive, as our prime goal. And in that first episode, in the first portion of the episode, I made the case that we might have that backwards, that we might get better group outcomes and better group results in our choral groups, but also in society, if we make the individual the primary goal. The strengthening of and the building up of the individual integrity and the individual contribution of every member of our group, we would be better off overall. It's something I try to do a good job of in my classroom, trying to get to know the individual students that I have, what makes them tick, what they feel like they can contribute, what their insecurities are. I think that it translates into a better rehearsal and in the long run, a better group overall. So we'll dig into that topic a little bit more here with Anthony Maglione, the director of choirs at William Jewell College, just north of Kansas City, and a good friend of mine, and I hope that you enjoy that conversation. This part of the episode is brought to you by SightReadingFactory.com. Sight Reading Factory is an awesome resource for any level of choral director. As I've said before, this is a resource I've even used to audition professional singers. You can crank up the difficulty level so it'll give adults fits all the way down to things that we can use on the very first day of school with ninth graders. I've seen junior high directors use it really, really well and get their kids advancing in music literacy. So if you head over to sightreadingfactory.com, they've got all kinds of fun toys over there. Even if you teach instrumental music, you can build up exercises for all kinds of instruments. So sightreadingfactory.com, and when you make a membership, or when you set up your membership, enter Choralosophy at checkout, you'll get yourself a 10% discount. So with no further ado, I will move it into the discussion already recorded with Anthony Maglione. Okay, I'm here with Anthony Maglione. Anthony's the director of choral activities at William Jewell College, just north of Kansas City, and a good friend of mine and colleague here in Kansas City, and I thought he'd be a good person to talk to about this topic from the collegiate side of things, as you've heard from me about high school struggles, and you heard a little bit from Stephen Rue earlier about working with elementary school kids, and so I thought I'd bring Anthony on to talk about, well, what about when those kids grow up and they go on to the college choral environment and what challenges exist there. So Anthony, thanks for coming on.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here, Chris. Thank you.
So talk to us a little bit about this. Does the struggle of finding individuals within your choir, your choral environment, and finding what makes them tick, does that problem just go away when they get to college?
No, it sure doesn't. And we have typically even less time with them than at least speaking from experience. When I was teaching high school, I had way more contact hours with my students than I tend to have at the college level, particularly with those students who are not music majors. And that makes up a good number of our choristers, members of our choirs. So those students come in, they sing for the hour or so that I see them a day or a couple days a week, and then they're gone. They're off into their nursing major or their business major, and I don't really see them other than that.
Right.
So yeah.
So what are some tricks that you do, or what are do you have rehearsal strategies where you try to get to hear from these kids as individuals?
Not necessarily rehearsal strategies during the actual academic portion of the year, but we do take the time at several points during the year to get together outside of class. Mm-hmm. So the ensemble gets together for a retreat type of situation where it's still a rehearsal, but there's also some opportunity to have a little bit of social time where we can get to talk to one another and get to know one another.
Okay, so that's great. Yeah, so I wonder then, how important do you see that time to be in the sense that, like, does it come back to show dividends and benefits later in the rehearsal?
Yeah, of course, of course. Um, and I know a lot of people think about their teaching in terms of at least their ensemble teaching in terms of here is a product over a certain amount of time. We're trying to get to our students to a certain level and get a certain number of concepts taught and learned. Uh, at the college level, there still is that push, but the other side of it is there's an opportunity to get to know these students at a time in their lives where they're deciding who they're going to be
Hmm.
for real. In high school, in my experience with my high school students, they were not ready to be figuring that stuff out. Some of them were very mature, but a lot of them were still floundering as to what they were going to have for lunch, let alone who they were going to be when they became adults. But that 18 to 22 year range with the undergraduates is particularly it's an excellent time to actually get to know these students as people who are growing up from children into adulthood for real.
Do you see that changing, or have you seen that change over your lifetime and your time teaching in college? Do you feel like college kids are what they were when we were in college, or is culture changing?
I mean, culture is changing, but I think fundamentally they're pretty much the same as we were. However, it's very difficult for me to reconcile that I was ever that young and that I ever said some of the dumb things that I most likely said uh, because I just didn't know better or I didn't think. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah. I wonder too if the I think about this all the time with in this era of students growing up with the ability to express their individuality through their social media in ways that I know I didn't have any access to. I remember the first time Facebook came out, I was in graduate school, and um, and I got an account and hardly ever used it. And before that, there was like I had a Zanga page, I think, but hardly ever used it. And that was all in my in my adult years. But I can't imagine how it would have changed my sense of self if I was posting all my thoughts as a 14-year-old. So when they get to college, how do you does their like, I guess here's my question: does that online expression of their individuality ever creep into the rehearsal? Is it Do you ever see their drama? Do they uh, does that ever create dissonance between the students?
You
Because it
know,
does in high school.
yeah, I think, yeah, I'm sure it does, but I think they're at a point where they're able to handle it much better.
Hmm.
Uh, and particularly at a school like William Jewell, where it's a small, tight knit community, there isn't a lot of room for that kind of drama, or else they're going to be very unhappy very fast.
Hmm.
It's a we only have. I mean, there's 40 in the top choir, and unless those students go out and get to know other students within that outside of that ensemble in music, um, that's their group.
Right.
That's their group of friends, and uh, and so I think I haven't necessarily seen that become an issue. Uh, they have used social media in some really inventive ways to reach out to their friends and to connect with people that I wasn't aware of. So I've learned a lot from them in that respect, but not so much in ways that have caused drama or
Well, yeah,
unrest.
that's good. I've even I had to go so far as to ask a student to apologize to another student in front of the whole choir about things that were said online because they just couldn't even function in the rehearsal, even though that's not really my job. It didn't take place at school. It just
Right.
but we
Right.
had to, but because that dissonance came into our classroom, I had to deal with it. I imagined that with college students, it probably isn't quite that immature, but
Well, and maybe they figured that stuff out in high school.
hmm.
They do most of their learning during that ninth through 12th grade
Right.
experience. However, I will say that there have been over the years, as musicians tend to have egos, there have been some issues with emails being sent inappropriately between students that have caused arguments and things like that.
Mm.
Mostly critiques of each other, which is where the students on the particularly music majors get into the thick of it.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So they just graduate to a different, a more mature medium for their for, for their bullying. That's good. So I wonder if, as the director in a college rehearsal, do you ever come across struggles in just like wondering or second guessing how you're speaking to the ensemble, how you're presenting information, uh, in the sense that you want to make sure that you're recognizing all of the different types of people in the ensemble, all the different backgrounds,
Yeah.
not leaving anyone out, but also knowing that you can't make everyone happy all the time. Uh, how do you dance that dance?
Well, I have a two-part answer for this one. The high school where I taught in central New Jersey, outside of New York City, was really diverse. So I had the opportunity to cut my teeth as a young teacher in a really diverse environment.
Mm.
Um, Backgrounds, socioeconomics, race, ethnicity, we had it covered in central New Jersey. Um, However, the thing that has been the most challenging in the last couple of years has been the the change in with students who, not change necessarily, but um, the opportunity for students to be open about being trans and about being non-gender conforming or
Mm.
gender non-conforming rather, and so learning how to speak and to maintain uh, to show those students that you care about them by using the pronouns that they expect and prefer.
Ah,
You
okay.
know, and that has changed the way I speak to my ensembles, and has changed the way that we've uh, listed our uh, attire,
Hmm.
so that we can be more inclusive in that regard.
And when you say listing your attire, meaning it could be that I've seen this before, but see if applies to you, where there's a tuxedo or a suit and a dress, and you would choose the one that's most comfortable for you.
That
That,
kind of thing. So
that
instead, yeah. So instead of saying ladies wear X,
mm,
gentlemen wear Y, I
mm-hmm,
say here are some choices.
mm,
You wear what makes you comfortable within this
mm-hmm,
choice. And so we've also, when we're not wearing our traditional robes, because Jewel has been wearing robes for over 130 years, so I'm not changing that anytime soon. But when we don't wear those, we use concert black, and so
okay,
that provides a lot of options, many options for our students who are still working on finding attire that expresses who they are, but within the professional music context.
right. Although I guess the robes would kind of solve the gendered attire issue.
Well, it does, except for the fact that part of that tradition was tights. It used to be, all sopranos and altos wore black tights that came down below the robes and flats, and all tenors and basses wore white collared shirts with straight black ties underneath the robes. So that's what
Okay.
you would see. And so we've had to sort of juggle that a little bit to make it more inclusive for those students.
Ah, yes. I guess I can identify with that at the high school. We've had robes for close to 100 years there at the high school too, and they had a similar deal. I solved that problem by not really caring what they wear under their robes as long as I can't see it and it's black.
Yeah, yeah, and
In
that's
which case,
essentially, yeah, yeah.
at that point, I don't have to even really make someone go into that uncomfortable space and having to explain how they might be quote different from someone else. And to me, ultimately, that's kind of what individualism in a group is for me philosophically. Since this podcast has osophy right in the title, it's like that's kind of the point of these episodes, is to kind of dive into what makes it, the why of how we do these things. I feel like if we are treating our students each as their own entities, that no one will be like them afterwards, and no one has been like them before. Then we take them each as they come, and a lot of their I guess presupposed ideas of what group they fall into or what little sub population they fall into kind of falls off to the side, because if you're just interacting them with eye contact and this I'm me and you're you, then a lot of those problems fall away.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And
And
that pays dividends in the rehearsal process later, because they feel like they're a part, and that you have taken them, at that person, that singular person, into consideration when you make decisions.
hmm absolutely. Um, I teach in Lee Summit, which is not all that diverse. Although I teach at the school that is the most diverse in that town.
Sure.
That's the way I would explain it. I would say we're not diverse by national standards, but by our part of the country standards, we're pretty diverse. And I had a fascinating conversation with some of my students this last year, as we realized all together, um, after the fact, that my chamber choir this year is the most racially diverse group that the school has ever had.
Wow.
And of course, that the chamber choir, at least in my high school, is rigorously auditioned. They have to go through 3 rounds, and they almost all take voice lessons, and it's hard for them to get in. And we were kind of looking around the room, and somebody made a joke about it, because most of my kids know that, like, I don't really care about what skin color they are. Like, they know that they wouldn't even be on my radar, and they pointed it out to me, and I said, "Oh wow, that's really cool." And I asked them how that makes them feel, and we kind of got down the rabbit hole of all the stuff that students of color deal with now, which is of course different than their parents' generation, in the sense that racism and such is not overt, but at the same time, or as much, but it's always kind of under the surface of things. And it was a really interesting conversation, because they knew that not a single one of them made it into that choir because they had a different color skin. Yet
That's good.
at the same time, they were really proud, and that so many kids that looked like them were starting to think choir was cool. And
That's great.
and that's the way they took it, and I was so proud of that, because not a single one of them made it an accomplishment for the group. They made it an accomplishment for themselves, like, because I was able to tell them, like, you made it here not because I said I wanted to have 9 students of color in the choir this year. It was
Right.
because your score was higher than the other kids who tried out, and so you made it. And I think that's so important, and they were beaming. And it also got the part of the representation part of the conversation, because that was the part that got me the most excited. Was not uh, not any of the like, as if we had a quota, but because I said, well, look, what do you think about the next generation of 9th and 10th grade kids that come in and look up on that stage and see other kids that look like them?
Yeah.
They're going to see that choirs is a place that anybody from any background can be successful. And so to me, even though that had results in quote unquote group representation, it all came about because of an individualist ethic in the choir, which is that they all were treated as individuals and had a chance to shine. So that was a bit of a rant, I guess. But what I really was wondering too, from your perspective, I know William Jewell is also probably not super diverse by national standards.
No, not at all.
Yeah, but you do have diversity of all types of student backgrounds, as you said, sexuality, sexual presentation, um, you know, ethnic backgrounds. Is that something that you ever uh, have to think about on a day-to-day basis, or is it something that you feel like your culture there is already well tuned, no pun intended, to having people just be able to be themselves?
No, this is definitely something that has been built over the last 6 or 7 years. Um, and with each group of students, the culture shifts ever so slightly because the nature of the ensemble is that it's by audition. The top ensemble, at least, I'll speak to. It's by audition, but it is, if you're a first year, you can make it. If you're a senior, you can make it. Mm-hmm. And if you're a first year and you come in and you do a great audition, you can knock a junior out. You know,
Right.
that's great, but it also puts 18-year-olds in the choir with 22-year-olds, which is, and there's a big difference between in maturity, in sort of experience, both as not necessarily music, I mean life experience. So that causes for just slight changes in culture, but for the most part, at this point, yes, I feel confident that it's a place where those students can come in and feel good about who they are, and know that at the very least, I will definitely accept them for who they are, and that hopefully their colleagues are really reaching out to do the same.
That's awesome, and I think that's how it should be. And I think as directors, we have a unique ability to build that culture in the choir room, because if we don't, nobody will. It's,
Right.
we're the ones that are there after the kids leave.
That's right.
And as the new group come in. So I think that's important. Well, Tony, I'm going to take this conversation one more direction before I let you go, which
Sure.
is that earlier in the episode, the audience heard me talk a little bit about how I see issues related to this outside of the personal that we've just discussed, and also in the way people sing. So I have this theory that too frequently in choral music, we try to achieve blend by removing all of the things that are special about a person's voice, so that no one sticks out.
Right.
And because I feel that is the easiest way to do it. So a lot of people take the easiest route, which is, okay, we're going to remove all the overtones, we're going to remove all of the vibrato, we're going to remove all of the everything that is interesting about you, so that you're making this sine wave, like choir synthesizer ooh sound. And I wonder, the way I think of it is that instead of that, if each singer is making the same choices about how to maximize their resonance, how to sing their pure vowel, to sing in tune, all of those things, that blend will just be something that happens.
Yeah, I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. I do stand my students that old James Jordan Weston Noble style.
Okay.
And I mess with that often because I feel like certain overtones of specific voices, formants and overtones can help those singers hear better. And so I do mess with that quite a bit. And it usually plays off. So if a student is complaining that they're having a hard time hearing, I'll move voices around in the section. But the crux of that is that I make sure that they're not affecting their sound, like affect of their sound. So don't change what you're doing. Let the job fall on me to figure out where you stand to make the physics of the sound work the way it needs to work. Also, I think it's mostly because I teach the ear training sequence at Jewel, but I teach certain concepts in the classroom, and I think you and I have had this conversation before, and we're on the same page about training their ears to hear the best sounds. To hear the sounds, the ideal sound, to hear what is in tune, to hear what is a vowel that is tuned between 3 to 5 to 8 to 20 singers, right? And if they can master those concepts, and it's the slower way of doing it, but it's a way that if you teach it from the beginning, and they can grow with mastery of understanding what it is they're actually listening for and what it is they actually have to do themselves and take ownership of it individually, then your sound product is going to be far better at the end without you even having to say the word blend.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a word that I very rarely say in rehearsal.
Yeah,
Instead, I might say something like, um, you know, tenors, is that this? Are you choosing the same vowel the altos are choosing?
exactly,
Um,
exactly.
or or maybe just listen. Can we just listen for that chord to lock in?
Yep,
And the blend will, because the chord won't lock in or the vowel won't align if blend isn't happening anyway. In
right.
other words, it's to me, blend is something that happens when all the other things are being done correctly.
Yeah,
It's not a goal. It's not a primary directive. It's a result.
right.
Does that make sense to you too?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that when you quote blend and you take the individuality out of each of those voices, you lose the beauty of what is your choral sound,
Mm-hmm.
because every choir needs to sound different because they're different people,
Yeah.
and so I have a very very strong bass section this year, um, and there are four guys that sing in the low bass section, uh, that are just like 32-foot pipes. I don't have that every year,
Mm-hmm.
but that colors the entire bass section. But
Right.
I'm not going to say, hey, lighten it up so you can sound more like a baritone section that I had 2 years ago, because I want it to sound that. I let them be what they're going to be, and I try to get them to make the best decisions on their own,
Right.
as musicians, as contributing players.
That's excellent. I totally agree, and I think taking it back to something you just said a minute ago, just so that a listener doesn't misunderstand, and let's say you're kind of new to these concepts, and I think most people are probably not, but just in case you are, when Anthony's talking about standing the choir in different positions and letting someone move so that it works for them, I don't want people to think that either of us are advocating for a singer getting to sing just however they feel like it, and if it's not and if it's not working for you, then we'll just find a different place, because again, it's about the techniques that we teach
Right.
them, and if you're still doing all of those things correctly, it still might not work because there are infinite possibilities within a choir of what might happen. Then we might rearrange. Is that a fair edit?
Yes.
Good. That's great. That's great. So, tell me a little bit about some of the other things that you do. I know you write music. You do some stuff out at Westminster in the summer. Just let people know about what it is that makes you tick all the way
Oh,
around.
sure. Yeah, I write music. I have commissions yearly, and a lot of stuff for choir, but also stuff for other instrumentations and things of that sort. I've been making time for myself to be able to sing a lot more lately too, and so that's why, luckily, I have the time to be in Contorai this year in KC. But I also sing with the Same Stream, which is James Jordan's professional choir out in Philadelphia. Um, and then I teach beginning conducting for adults at Westminster Choir College in Princeton over the summer, that's a real joy.
Well,
Uh,
beginning conducting for adults. What does that mean? What do they?
yeah, right. It's people who, the way I put it is, this class is really geared for people who have wound up in conducting positions that didn't expect they would be.
Ah,
You're the church organist, and they used to have a conductor, but they got rid of that position, so now you have to lead the choir. Or we've had
oh,
faculty members from different schools, different universities, that have had to lead the choir because they were in the middle of a search, and but they still needed to run the program, and so they didn't have someone, so they needed to go and get some training so they could, you know teach a choir at a college, or teach a choir in a school, or they're homeschool music teachers. We've had a couple of those.
interesting. That's
Yeah,
fascinating.
it's
That's
really great. It's a
That's a
great
really cool
course.
thing.
Yeah.
Well, where can people find your music? Are you published in places that people would be able to find it easily?
Sure, 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 sure. The works that are published are on GIA. They're on James Jordan's Evoking Sound choral series. The ones that are not published, you can get through my website, which is anthonymaglione.com.
Okay, great. So for the audience listening, what I will do is after we are offline, I'll have Anthony send me some links to the places where you can find his music if you're interested in checking it out, and I will simply embed that in the page with this interview.
Yeah.
So I'm so excited to have had a chance to hash this stuff out with you. It sounds like we're on the same page about a lot of things, but I really was interested from the collegiate perspective to see if you kind of deal with anything um, that's different than than I do at the high school level. So that was very helpful. And it sounds like to boil it down, they're the same, but they're just more mature, and they're maybe a little bit less in your business about their issues.
Well, I wouldn't go that far,
Oh,
but
okay.
there is one adage though that a colleague of mine said. Sometimes when you we tend to get frustrated. Sometimes with students learning how to be independent adults, and my colleague says to me, Tony, just remember, 4 years ago that student was in eighth grade.
Yeah.
And so that sort of puts it in perspective. So we are uh, all of us teachers from elementary school through the college degree are all part of helping these students become who they're going to be,
Yeah.
and
That's
I,
awesome.
it is a cool part.
Yeah, it's my favorite part of the job, and but at the same time, even with the college students that you teach, it's got to be true. Because I think about my own self at age 21 or 22. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in the same room with that person now. You, you know,
Yeah,
so it's not even like they think they know who they're going to be in college too, but they really don't. Like that process is never ending, and I think
that's right.
well, I see our opportunity as choir directors as a chance to kind of be a microcosm of their whole life, in the sense that they're going to grow and develop, and you can't ever be as good at choral music as you will ever be. Like there's always
Right.
something you can do more.
Yes.
So and I think if nothing else, we can teach our students that, and then they go on and they apply that to their life.
Yeah. I completely agree.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. I think that's a great philosophy to approach things with, and I see you doing that with your students at Jewel, and see the community that they're building up there, and I'm very proud of that. So it's very awesome of you to come on and chat with me. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for asking me. This is such a cool program that you're hosting.
Oh, well, I hope it turns out okay. I'm still trying to figure out who we're going to be also as a show. So
Sure.
I'm sure a year from now it's going to look different, and but it's going to be an organic thing that kind of takes on a life of its own. I think.
Yeah. It's
That's
awesome.
all right. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
You got it, Chris. Take care.
All right. Bye. Thanks again for listening to an entire fleshed out discussion on something that I find is very important. And I hope that everybody is able to come out of this two-part episode with some thoughts and maybe some reflection about how they see their individual students, and how they seek to know them better and highlight their skills and their contributions. One of the things I love about the podcast medium is that nobody gets to decide how long these episodes are. It's a free form, long form conversation that I think is badly needed, and something that you can't get at a convention. When you go to a presentation, it's oftentimes one-sided and very much limited in time, and the topics don't always get discussed as in depth as we can here on a podcast. So I hope you enjoy that. I know I'm finding it stimulating, and I've already learned a whole lot. If you're listening still to this point of the this last episode, then you are probably one of the new listeners to this show, because it's a brand new show. This is the last little bit of what I have called my initial content release. You might have noticed that you probably haven't heard about this show before last month. This was all a project over the last 4 weeks to get 4 episodes recorded. And because of that freedom of the format, it's turned into really 6 episodes, 4 topics, 2 of which expanded beyond my intent to just interesting conversations that I hope you are able to participate in. So please email me at choralosophy@gmail.com if you've got comments, or if you've got questions about anything that you heard us discuss. You can also join Choralosophers on Facebook, which is a closed Facebook group where we can have some of these topics fleshed out even deeper, and hearing your input on some of the things that we've discussed. I think these are important conversations. And beyond this initial release of content, my goal is to release another episode every other week. So I hope that everybody understands that my first flourish here of 6 episodes all in the span of 1 month is not a sustainable model. I am just trying to give people lots of different samples of what this show is going to be like as part of our first attempt. So in the future, my plan is to space out the topics a little bit more, and hopefully you'll get your little notifications every couple weeks that a new episode is ready. This is not a full-time job for me, of course, so my intent is to do it little bits at a time, but regularly, so that you can expect to hear from me again and to hear from my guests again on different topics that are approaching us as educators. And one of the best ways to keep the content fresh is for us to all stay involved online in this conversation with those methods that I mentioned before. So follow me on Twitter, like the Facebook page, communicate with email, and let's really make this something special that is a resource for all of the choral profession, whether you are a singer, a conductor, a teacher, in any capacity. We want to make choral music thrive in all of our societies and cultures wherever you're listening, and that is the goal. So you have a host here of the show who is very supportive of you and all of the things that you're working on in your career, and I really want you to be involved. So I hope to hear from you. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app and rate to help other people find it, and let's grow the Choralosopher community. Thank you very much.